I sat in Clyde the human's living room as he prepared some kind of food in the kitchen. He hummed a soft tune as the clink and clack of utensils and pots filled the room. I shifted my weight on the couch, a device for resting not meant for my physiology. According to Clyde, I wasn't dissimilar in appearance to the human world's albatross, if it had weird scraggly arms instead of wings. Clyde shuffled from the kitchen in his bathrobe, graying hair cut neatly near to the top of his head, the skin around his face wrinkled from many of what he called a good laugh or cry, though I had no meaning to these words. Clyde set a plate of thinly sliced fish on some sort of grain in front of me, before sitting down with a plate of brown, red, and yellow in blobs and odd shapes. Before I ate the sashimi Clyde had prepared, I curiously asked, "Human Clyde, what is on your plate?" He paused with a cube of red halfway to his open mouth, quickly closing it as though not to show his teeth too long. Gesturing with a multi-pronged utensil to each item, he stated, "Eggs, potatoes, toast, and steak." He picked up the red cube of steak and stuck it in his mouth, chewing slowly and thoughtfully with his eyes closed. I paid him no more attention as I picked up a piece of sashimi and set it in my beak, closing it and mimicking Clyde's actions as opposed to my usual glut. My eye membranes flicked back the moment I closed them as flavors I'd never encountered danced across my tongue. I couldn't stop myself as I masticated the sashimi and grabbed another piece, repeating the process until my plate was empty. I felt satisfied. Even after such a small meal, I felt I could eat no more. Clyde mopped his plate with a piece of toast before stuffing it in his mouth and setting his plate on the table. "I appreciate the visit, Beak. You know us old guys don't get much company other than each other," Clyde stated amicably, stretching his long arms and wrinkled hands upwards as his joints creaked softly. I borrowed a human expression, nodding as I chirped my reply. "Well, there's not many humans in this settlement, and I will admit I find how varied your cultures are from human to human an interesting prospect." Clyde nodded softly and stroked the floppy green hat on its stand atop his small side table with a soft smile, gazing into nothing. "Us military men are like that. Proud of where we came from, we take it everywhere with us as a reminder of home." He trailed off and looked down, wiping his eyes before saying, "My apologies. I get reminiscent of home." I nodded softly. I could tell the human was struggling with some great weight upon his shoulders. I felt an odd thing in my chest and approached the human, placing my hand upon his shoulder and patting softly. "You don't need to apologize, however. I need to go to the vendors and pick up things for the day." I felt that twinge again as he nodded, and I left for the market. The street was oddly quiet this morning as I took up my basket and began my walk to the market. I found myself humming the tune Clyde had been as I turned the corner to the main road. I froze. Skelvians, hundreds of them, if not thousands, in their silent hovercraft, floating down the main road and breaking off in perfect unison to invade the streets. How? The defense barrier," I mumbled to myself. Then, one of the Skelvian LS in the foremost craft turned, looking straight at me with its ugly diamond-shaped head and 4 heat-sensing eyes. I stumbled backwards and ran, dropping my basket, my scared mind lamenting its loss, as I clumsily ran away from the Skelvian hovercraft. But I could hear it, the whistle of the vehicle picking up speed. They were going to kill me. Skelvians never let potential threats survive. I tried for Clyde's door just as the hovercraft rammed into me. I felt ribs break as I was slung to the side. The plasticrete pavement smooth and cold against my face, I coughed, and purple leaked from my beak. Blood. I was kicked over onto my back, and a Skelvian pointed his kinetic blaster at my face, my eyes staring down the deadly little hole in the end. The PA system squealed, and the Skelvians looked up. That melody that Clyde had been humming began an instrumental, and soon a human voice started to sing. "Fighting soldiers from the sky, fearless men who jump and die, men who mean just what they say, the brave men of the Green Beret." A deafening thunderclap echoed down the street, a chunk disappearing from the Skelvians, head in a spray of opaque goop. The Skelvians turned towards the gunshot as another rang out, another Skelvian falling to the ground and revealing my savior. Clyde, armor slung over his bathrobe, floppy green hat perched atop his head, a wooden-stocked magazine-fed rifle tucked tight into his shoulder as he swung the barrel onto the third Skelvian, pulling the trigger and removing a chunk from their head, dropping them to the ground. The fourth Skelvian shared his fellow's fate as he hit the plastic reet. Clyde turned as more hovercraft began to come down the street. He raised a hand with all fingers extended above his head and dropped it, pointing at the hovercraft approaching rapidly along the almost deserted street. To say the scream of the rocket launcher was loud would be an injustice, as the Hellion anti-convoy missile flew over Clyde's head, impacting the middle of the column and detonating. The wash of heat and pressure overwhelmed me, and I lost consciousness. My hands shook violently for a moment as I set the pen down and reclined in the human hospital bed. I'd been writing down the events of last week as best I could remember them for a while now, but there was something odd that day it all started. The invasion was not repelled by any formal army. Rather, Clyde and many of the human veterans fought tooth and nail for our little colony. While many of us non-humans had been ill-prepared, believing the defense barrier to be invulnerable, the human veterans stockpiled weapons, ammunition, ordnance, and medical supplies, and all of it was manned by men in their late 70s. I closed my eyes and laughed softly, the feeling relieving some of the weight I didn't know I felt. Crazy old humans. I owe my life to them.